in. I'm Do. I am the founder of Terra Money. But I guess if you're in this room, you probably know that already. So hosting this AMA is going to be Seb, a longtime member of the Terra community. So Seb, whatever questions you want to ask, let's have this conversation.
All right. Hi, Do. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here, and thanks for organizing that, Ayush and Do, because I think it's been a while that we have had this kind of call, probably like even before the Encore launch. So I've kind of reached out to a lot of the people that I know in the Terra community, trying to gather like, questions or key questions, or key topics that people want to explore a little bit. But maybe, we should all start by asking you, though, how do you feel since the launch of Encore, since the major delivery of Miro for a while ago, but Encore, and then achieving those big milestones in the Terra roadmap, and what's your state of mind right now? Well, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so I think there's obviously a lot of positive momentum going on in the Terra community, but I think we should be cognizant that everything that's been produced so far is an interesting proof of concept, and then really the interesting things that you can do on top of things like mirrored assets and anchor yield are yet to come. So the ability to buy price exposure using mirrored assets is independently interesting, but it could be achieved by, let's say, centralized exchanges listing tokenized versions of equities. Similar for Anchor, 20% yield is indeed very attractive, but it's not beyond our imagination to imagine that centralized crypto lenders would be able to produce a similar or competitive type of yield. Once we have this foundation, though, where protocols like Mirror and Anchor get super interesting, is that you can sort of redirect and build on this foundation to do really interesting things, leveraging the inherent programmability of blockchain systems. So, for example, like it's not just interesting that mirrored assets allow for price exposure. It's that by building on top of mirrored assets, you can do more on Mirror than you can ever imagine with traditional equities. So for example, if you combine Mirror and Anchor together, you could end up in a situation where by holding mirrored assets, you could be earning a 20% dividend profile on holding equities, which you're never going to get by holding Tesla or Apple. By Anchor, with upcoming protocols like Pylon and let's say Angel Protocol and various different things like that, you are able to sort of expand the design space of transactional relationships to something that just wasn't like a simple payment or barter system between two different parties, but you also unlock different types of dimensions of payments, like for example, give once and then that sort of benefits people in perpetuity, or you also unlock systems like whereby like you're paying people with cash flow instead of just giving things. Right, so I think things are about to get a lot more interesting, and I think, I don't think I've ever been happier working on so many different things at once.
Yeah, that's cool. And do you think of this kind of composability? Did you get triggered by all the people reaching out to you to try to build on Terra, and you integrate this kind of third-party projects into the plans you have for composing around Encore and Mirror as well, or is it something that like you already had in mind before you released the V1 of all these apps?
So I kind of expected to be doing things on my own for a while, but like quite honestly, I've started to lose track of the different things that are going on. A lot of these projects are sort of building in public out in the open, either through Terra's hackathon programs or by trying to appeal to the community fund. But there's also a lot of efforts, for example, such as Mars, which was announced recently, that are being developed in stealth behind closed doors. I think a fair number of those projects have reached out to me, but a fair number of those probably didn't because they don't need to. And yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to do is that in this burgeoning ecosystem, I'm sort of like what I do independently is starting to consume a lot less and less of the narrative. But I'm sort of doing my own thing. Things that are happening independent of me also are very interesting. But I would say that the resultant ecosystem that comes as a result of it is going to be that much more interesting. So like, I genuinely have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But that's exciting, I guess, in the same time. But you know, you said I'm a long-term community member. I've been here for quite a while, and you know, we saw really the surge since the release of Mirror, a surge of people reaching out and trying to build things. You know, whether or not involving you from the beginning or just trying to build their own prototypes on the side, and it's super exciting, I think. Okay, I just want to rebound on what you said earlier about decentralization, and that you know, some of the protocols you discussed here that could be achieved in a centralized way, maybe like not very likely, but it could still be possible. It's like, is decentralization something on your mind lately? Are you thinking about how Terra could be less reliant on your person and maybe, you know, like working as an independent entity that you know, leverage the community to move forward, build things, and through governance, just, you know, yeah, build basically.
Well, so the way that I like to think about it is that, like, if the ecosystem is doing its job, I don't need to do anything to encourage decentralization, right? So all I need to do is keep building. So if the Terra ecosystem is growing at the pace where it makes sense, then in that case, the aggregate output of the rest of the Terra ecosystem should surely outstrip all the things that I do. If the entire ecosystem can't produce at a pace where it makes the output of one person minuscule in comparison, then there's definitely something wrong with that ecosystem, right? So what I like to do is that I like to plan for a future whereby I'm not actively discouraging decentralization, but it's also not one of those things where I'm spending a lot of time thinking about, because I think that's one of those things that's going to happen eventually. So what I'm gonna be doing from now until, you know, hopefully forever, is to keep building interesting things on top of the Terra protocol, and hopefully that sort of gets a lot more people to engage and to participate in the community and to build other cool things that is going to put to shame everything I build. So I think that's the progressive march to decentralization.
Okay, thanks. Very interesting. So I'm just going to try to read the questions from the community as we go here. So there's a couple of questions that revolve around scaling up, Mirror, but like more specifically, like I think the Terra network. Like, but I know you've been talking about this in some recent interview that we've seen with regards to the TPS throughput of Terra, and how could the Cosmos zones help with that. So I don't know if you want to, you know, expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so if you sort of zoom out far enough, a blockchain is basically a state machine. So in order to scale the state machine when pushed to the extremes, you essentially do two different things. Like, number one, you tier the state machine. So for sort of each locality of concern, you have a fewer number of people or a few number of nodes that are verifying each sort of subsection of the state machine or some locality. Or you require that the people that are verifying the state has higher performance. So this is basically like the conundrum between vertical scaling and horizontal scaling in blockchains. What the Tendermint and the Cosmos stack really enables, especially through the advent of IBC, is that it really makes it easy to separate local concerns in terms of parsing state versus sort of the global state of how state should be stored and verified. So what that means is in sort of like the Cosmos version of the world, there's essentially branded shards, which means that like each of the blockchains have their own branded concerns of how state should be stored. So for example, let's say Kava blockchain, which is a Cosmos zone, is essentially like a shard, and it processes things that are, you know, pertinent to the lending markets within Kava itself. Like persistence, for instance, is like a zone. and then it stores all the things where it has to pertain to credits and different things like that that are happening in its own applications. And then the idea is that whenever global state needs to sync across different of these different shards, then IBC would be the enabler that allows that to happen. So I guess as Terra scales, what would need to happen is that more and more of these states would need to be segregated out to different state machines. So for example, Anchor might have its own state, or even like within Anchor itself, it might be, let's say, like a particular bank or a particular fintech app that needs to store its own state. And then there might be a different state for things like Nebula, or there might be some different state machine for Spar. And then in some sense, like the only sort of common thread that ties together all of these different states is going to be the money, which is the Terra stablecoin. So the common thread, the common state that gets synced across all of these different state machines is how the balances of this money changes across all of these different states. So that's going to be, yeah, that's going to be what we're going to have to solve.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
And you're saying balances of money, but like the oracles would be live on any zone basically, right? You wouldn't need to sync with the latest state to just get the latest oracle price, right?
No, you wouldn't need to sync the oracle prices all the different machines. So basically, like at some point, the Terra state machine could be something that just that keeps the account balances of all the different Terra stablecoins, and then enables swaps between, hey Nacho, between Terra stablecoins and Luna to enable the stability mechanisms of their one. And all the different applications that are being built on top of Terra could have their own independent state machines. So whenever you need to, let's say, swap out to a different currency or to manage accounts, or to swap out to Luna for stability arb purposes, then in that case, they can sort of sync state with the main sort of mother state machine.
Okay, I get it. And so the backbone of that is going to be the IBC protocol that has been released on Cosmos, and that is part of the upgrades that you're going to incorporate into the latest Columbus 5 version, right? I think I want to segue to a few topics here, if you agree with that. Like, I wanted to just get back into the list of the priorities that you outlined for Q1, Q2 on Terra, and then I think IBC is one of the things that's going to be key for the success of Anchor. And I think it's you mentioned that this is part of what the upgrades to Columbus 5 are going to include, right?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So what's the dependency for IBC with regards to Terra? Is it going to be only Anchor, or there are other protocols or functionalities that you expect to leverage IBC?
So frankly, the challenge with the IBC right now, and I think this is something that a lot of interchain bridging protocols, sort of like a common problem that they're sharing as well, is that there aren't interesting things to connect to, right? So there are things. So for example, it'd be amazing to, for example, connect to ThorChain, for instance, and then have access to that interchain liquidity and things like that. It's just that there isn't like a huge reason to, let's say, rush to connect to the Cosmos Hub, for instance, because there's like literally nothing going on there, right? So I don't think it's just like a question whereby you enable the bridges and the use cases will flourish. Like you kind of have to have these sort of siloed use cases first before the bridging technology becomes useful. And I guess like one function of it is that we can use more collateral types for Anchor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in order for bridges to be inherently more useful, you need more independent use cases.
Okay. All right. Let me just check. Like I see a couple of questions on the the community. So though, do you believe that UST volume, UST market cap, I guess, will reach 10 billions at the end of the year, or are you revising your target?
Nope, 10 billion by the end of the year. Actually, there's a really interesting question that I wanted to get to. Hey, Do, I wanted to ask, from where does your confidence that fintech apps will integrate with Anchor rather than attempts to build competing infrastructure come from? I've heard the narrative of once one of them integrates it, it would be commercial suicide for the others to not to, but I have a hard time picturing centralized financial service companies relying on decentralized blockchains where community governance can change the rates when a lot of them have the capital to eventually build their own blockchain infrastructure in the long term. I wrote a bit more on the subjects here for those that are interested. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, so the scenario that you're proposing is not entirely impossible, but one thing about Anchor that should probably be emphasized is that it doesn't necessarily necessitate the existence of the Terra blockchain to run. Anchor could run as an entirely different system, and then it could leverage the top proof of stake blockchains in order to run correctly. So I don't think that the likelihood of fintech companies being able to pull off their own blockchains that would end up in the top ranks of proof of stake is high. Likely it implies decentralization, and for centralized fintech companies, the ability to pull off a decentralized operation, the stakes are quite high for that to happen. So I think the likelihood there is low. Another thing that gives me confidence is that I own a fintech company that has users. So it's not hard to imagine that other fintech companies would want to integrate with this. And then just make sure that I'm not speaking in a vacuum. Literally, there's so many different companies that are looking to or in the process of integrating Anchor now. So it's not just blank confidence. I just have more information than you. So, but I will read your Medium article. That does sound interesting. Yeah.
All right. Then carrying on, I think like one of the main question that I got back from community feedback was with regards to Luna staking. So can you just maybe give us a quick summary of the changes that are going to come with Columbus 5 update with regards to Luna staking, but mainly with regards to the senior distribution, the ending of the current maybe structure, and then moving on to collecting on-chain Luna Terra swaps fees and distributing them to oracles as Oracle rewards.
Yeah, so the entire premise of the Terra blockchain from its white paper has been algorithmically adjusted monetary policy. So what that means is, so essentially like the blockchain was designed to control two different levers, which is number one, the tax rates parameter, which means that anytime that Terra stablecoins change hands, a certain percentage of the transaction is paid out to Luna stakers as a fee. And that rate changes depending on changes in the economic parameters of whatever is happening to the Terra blockchain. The second parameter was something called the reward weight. So this parameter controlled whenever Luna is being swapped to mint Terra, how that Luna is going to be spent in the Terra ecosystem. So today, that reward weight was being algorithmically calibrated, and then a certain percentage of the tokens were being burned, and then the rest was not. It was going to places like the community pool and to staking rewards and things like that, which made the narrative for Terra seniorage and Luna burns very complicated because people are just not very good at dealing with that type of complexity. So we wanted to keep things simple in Columbus 5 and then transition to a system where, minting $1 worth of Terra stablecoin burns $1 worth of Luna. And then all the staking rewards that are coming to Luna comes from fees in the system. So that's basically what's going to happen. The reward weight parameter is going to be fixed at 0, coming Columbus 5, which means that every Luna that is being used to mint Terra stablecoins is going to be burnt. And then all the staking rewards that are coming to Luna is going to come from some sort of fee in the system. So either swap fees between Terra and Terra, or Terra to Luna and then Luna to Terra, or it's going to come from simple transaction fees that are coming from the Terra stablecoin economy. So the narrative is going to be super simple. Staking rewards in terms of fees, all synergy is going to be burned.
Okay, got you. And one of the things that the last few proposals on the Terra governance did is to take the rewards that were not distributed to the community pool, but the Oracle rewards, and then just kind of amortize those in for a length of 3 years, I think. Yeah, 3 years. Is it going to be the same with the swap fees, transaction fees onwards for the occurring on the Terra network, or this is going to this was just like a one-time modification?
Well, so like if you remember, what sort of started the motivation for Columbus 5 was a lot of positive feedback from the community to head in this direction. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to do this, but it's going to simplify the narrative. It's going to enhance the understanding of the people that are actually interacting with this blockchain. So it's basically a system whereby the community asks for something and I'm just doing it.
Okay. And your proposal was saying that like the community fund as it is right now should be burnt, or at least there should be a governance decision on what to do with the funds. And do you expect the community to come up with that proposal? Does it just fit in your idea of creating a DAO for the Terra network? How do you see that happening?
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting time to bring up this discussion, but one of the ideas that I had was to swap all the Luna in the community pool, burn it to mint UST, and then using that UST to bootstrap an insurance protocol called Ozone. So one of the big problems with, well, I should probably reveal the Ozone mechanism at some other time. But basically, if you're able to start out with an insurance mechanism for, let's say, Mirror or Anchor with, let's say, a few $100 million of capital starting, in that case, it's going to inspire a lot of confidence to be able to interact with Terra's DeFi stack. And it's going to sort of, like in my personal opinion, prediction, it's going to significantly accelerate the pace of growth that's going to happen in the system. While at the same time, it's going to burn a lot of Luna as a net result anyway, right? So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. One of the main feedback that I get from people that are not really versed into the Terra ecosystem is like, but really like 20% on Encore. How is that possible? Is it safe? Is somebody gonna pull the rug on this or not? So I think like, just the narrative of telling someone that funds are guaranteed, that's going to be very powerful.
Yeah. So a few more words on Ozone. So like what's going to be really interesting is that I think the reason why a lot of existing insurance protocols don't really work very well is because they have manual claims assessment, and risk assessment. So basically, these aren't really decentralized insurance protocols. They're just peer-to-peer insurtech companies that happen to deal with crypto. Right. So if you're going to do this all manually anyway, then what's the point of putting it in DeFi? Right. But what's going to be really interesting about Ozone is that it's going to be purely algorithmic in the sense that there doesn't have to be anyone assessing your risk. There's sort of a game theoretic way of determining whether your funds are safe or whether your funds have been lost. So in that case, it's very easy to weave in for new protocols that are coming in, as they can plug in really easily without having to be assessed or having to appeal to a centralized counterparty to be covered.
Oh, that's going to be very different from anything that exists with regards to insurance in DeFi, because from what I understand, it's always settled with a claim that's going through governance or anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm actually thinking we could sort of technically, if we wanted to export Ozone to Ethereum and then cover a bunch of DeFi stuff there. But then again, why would there's so many different things happening on Terra?
Oh man. Okay. Yeah, one last question on that. Do you think that so you mentioned that maybe the community fund could bootstrap the liquidity for the insurance protocol, but do you expect that like Anchor depositors will have to forfeit a part of their savings rates in order to subsidize this insurance process, or is it something
Yeah,
that?
so basically the idea is that Ozone would basically be an intermediary vault. So for example, if you want to stake to Anchor, you would stake to, let's say, an Anchor vault within Ozone. So you would send UST into the Ozone Anchor vault, and then Ozone on behalf of you is going to deposit your UST into Anchor, and then it's going to take a cut of the resultant APR.
Okay.
And then the idea is that at any given time when a user is looking to withdraw that UST, he can either withdraw that UST from the underlying Anchor deposit or against Ozone's insurance fund. So in which case, if your funds haven't been hacked, then you have no incentive to withdraw funds from the insurance fund. You would withdraw directly from the underlying Anchor deposit. And if the funds have indeed been hacked, then you would just withdraw from the insurance fund. Therefore, there doesn't need to be any manual claims assessment.
Okay. So it's kind of a binary check. Okay. That sounds great. So somebody's asking like, what's the scope of Ozone coverage? Like, is it just smart contract risk? But I guess what you're saying is that it would be some kind of binary check on the balance of the underlying Anchor account, right?
It wouldn't check anything. Ozone wouldn't have an understanding of whether the underlying contracts have been hacked.
Oh, you make the choice.
Like game theory, the users are incentivized to withdraw from the underlying instead of the insurance fund if the funds are safe. And if the funds have been hacked, they would just withdraw from the insurance fund. And that this would obviate the need for manual claims assessment.
Okay, got you. All right. So yeah, since we already moved to Anchor, I'm just gonna continue on that topic. So there was a lot of questions with regards to Anchor integration. So in one of your last interviews, you mentioned about like working on an Anchor SDK and also like working on fiat RAMs, especially in the US with the Prime Trust Company broker. Is there anything you want to talk about specific to Anchor? Being as broad as possible, like talking about like whether the ETH Anchor gateway is being used by other players, or if you've signed on some partnerships lately with regards to Anchor.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's productive to talk about specific partnerships during this AMA, but let's say this. So basically, the goal of Anchor is to incorporate as many different types of collateral as possible, but at the same time, be a savings protocol across all the different possible chains, and then incorporating as many different types of stablecoins as possible. And all of that eventually helps Terra, which eventually helps Luna. So the idea is that on Ethereum, you should be able to deposit USDT and then still be earning something that is close to the Anchor rate on different types of deposit, which allows Anchor to become the default savings protocol for DeFi on Ethereum. Same for Binance Smart Chain, and same for lots of different other places. So like the world that I envision is that all the different lending protocols and crypto lenders would essentially become front-end interfaces that wrap around Anchor, right? And this wouldn't even necessitate, in my opinion, fiat on-ramps and off-ramps, which is fairly easy to do. And I think all these sort of the major crypto vendors or front-end interfaces would eventually wrap around Anchor in such a way that is offering that type of competitive credit. So, which means that Anchor would indeed be sort of the federal funds rate in the world of blockchains or crypto. And I think about this in a relatively short time frame, let's say 12 months. And then after that, I think we will slowly start to expand into traditional fintech, although like the pickup or the take rate there is going to depend on a lot more variables. Like for example, our ability to secure affordable and regulated fiat on-ramps and off-ramps, regulatory appetite for having savings yield that is this attractive, and so on and so forth.
Okay, gotcha. And one specific question on Anchor, I think I've been asked as well to relay that question. So maybe Anchor and Mirror in that case, but with the token economics that you've put together for both Anchor and Mirror, how do you see those protocols being operating without emissions when the emission schedule is over, when there's no tokens generated to reward users that are providing LP or borrowing UST on Anchor? I think like you mentioned that there's a value accrual mechanic built into the system, so that like there's part of the fees extracted on those platforms are used to purchase ANC or MIR tokens on the market. But do you feel that the community is going to have to step in to try to look at token economics to sustain the models, or the current usage and metrics that you're seeing on both platforms don't justify that any change be done to the token economy of both?
So I think arguably you can make that case for MIR, because like how much liquidity forms for mirrored assets is going to depend on like whether there's going to be lots of different places that trade M assets independent of the liquidity rewards. But I think it's a stretch to make that argument for ANC. And just because like the commercial terms to be able to borrow off of your stake, it's just so fundamentally better on Anchor than on any type of crypto lending market in existence. And that's because like the protocol puts your cash flow to work to subsidize your funding rate, right? In some sense, like if your stake is yielding 13% on the respective blockchains, in that case, on any type of whatever the market rate for borrowing off of your stake is, it basically subtracts from that. So whatever efficient rate that Aave or Compound is giving you, it's just going to be that much cheaper by the annualized rate of your staking rewards. So if you have that type of relative benefit, I think it stands to reason that Anchor is going to be a very popular product in crypto lending markets for some time to come.
Okay, and you wanted to make a distinction with Mirror, basically?
Yeah, with Mirror, I think as to whether the sort of the abolition of liquidity rewards is going to make a difference is whether there's going to be third-party liquid markets pop up for M assets, right? So, and the reason why I say this is because Bitcoin is very liquid. Like Luna is pretty liquid, even though there's no liquidity rewards to encourage trading of these different assets, right? So it stands to reason that especially for a lot of different M assets, if we're able to form liquid markets around them, by the time that liquidity rewards disappear, then it's not a problem, right? Because mirrored assets in and of themselves would be an independent asset class that's trading pretty frequently.
And so, okay, and liquidity would be incentivized by the fees extracted from traders, basically.
No. Like the idea is that, like for example, if like mirrored assets were trading on Kraken, for instance, right, and then
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In that case, you don't need to incentivize that liquidity.
Okay. Understood.
So like if I had to make a prediction, I think what would happen is like eventually I think Mirror would evolve to cover hundreds of different assets, and I think a lot of the top assets, maybe like the top 20, is going to be highly liquid and trading on lots of different venues in crypto, whereas I think a lot of the long tail assets would be relatively less liquid.
Okay. All right. So continuing on the subject of Mirror, do you want to talk to us about Mirror V2 that you're currently working on at the moment? Back in February, when demand started to explode for Mirror, we saw that the M asset pegged to the Oracle price, the real world stock price, was difficult to sustain, and because liquidity was so huge on the protocol that and we were not minting USD as fast as the liquidity was growing and the demand was growing on the protocol. Premiums started to form on M assets. Just from my personal observation, that we don't see the premiums being that big on Mirror anymore, maybe just within the tune of 1 to 2%, meaning that there are players that are, playing the arbitrage game. Are you still working on solving, or do you still see the premium as an issue on Mirror? And is it something that you're going to try to address with Mirror v2?
Yeah, so in Mirror v2, like the main thing that's going to happen is that the Mirror protocol is going to resemble perpetual swap contracts a lot more closely. And what that means is that there's going to be a way to take long positions and there's going to be a way to take short positions. So basically at steady state, what's going to happen is that if you think about Mirror, it's basically a bunch of tokenized synthetics that is backed by a pool of UST, right? And this UST can be put to work in Anchor. So if it's put to work in Anchor, it's earning like a 20% yield on all the collateral. And what that means is that that 20% can swing between longs and shorts to basically simulate a virtual funding rate without anybody having to explicitly pay these fees. So for example, if in the market longs are being significantly favored compared to the shorts, in that case, this 20% interest on the collateral, which relative to the collateral position would be somewhere around, let's say, anywhere between 30 to 40%, could be paid to people that are taking short positions to compensate them for that, which is basically what's happening in people that are trading perpetual contracts or any type of options markets, actually. And then vice versa, if shorts are being heavily favored, you would have longs being paid the interest, right? So that's going to happen for some time. And then the liquidity rewards would also evolve to subsidize both the people that are providing liquidity on the long pairs as well as short pairs as well. We're going to be uploading a document outlining the specs for V2 on Mirror. Most of the contracts are finished and we've started to enter an audit recently. But yeah, the specs should be uploaded this week.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds awesome. So liquidity mining is going to be impacted by that program where the system is going to fund long position, short positions as well, right?
The end user shouldn't be able to
see the difference.
See the difference, but
okay. Okay, yeah, looking forward to read that. All right, so I had written that down with regards to Mirror, but I think it applies to Encore as well. We're seeing people, mentioning that the cost it takes to submit a proposal is quite high, which maybe is arguable. But also the main thing around the topic is that governance is difficult to drive with both Mirror and Encore because the quorum rules are difficult. The quorum thresholds are difficult to reach for any proposal, and people are wondering if there's any kind of update on that front for both Encore and Mirror in the pipes.
Well, so especially for Mirror, like I find it hard to subscribe to this vision that like people are being too apathetic, because I think there's like, I think most of the really interesting proposals that have come across Mirror have indeed passed, right? And we haven't reached like a level of apathy where we can't engage people on super interesting stuff. But I think people are mostly complaining that their assets that they wanted to get traded aren't being listed, which might be, I think, a function of the assets themselves being not sufficiently compelling and not because governance is too apathetic to be able to do anything useful. We're definitely in the early stages of both protocols, so I think we'll need to see how everything shapes out over time. But I think for now, governance seems to be doing its job where it's passing all the important proposals that is put in front of it. It's being frugal with entropy when assets that are being proposed that doesn't have significant, compelling community value propositions, and yeah, it seems to be doing its job pretty well in my perspective.
Okay, yeah. Hold
on, like there's something I wanted to get to. Hi, Do. I would like to ask about marketing. There seems to be a lack of focus of the team on marketing. Do you think it's something that should be addressed? Yeah, I don't know. Like I think the Luna community seems to be pretty strong. We work pretty hard. We seem to have pretty wide brand recognition in the general world of crypto. If you're suggesting that we run like paid marketing campaigns on like Twitter and stuff like that, that's not really what we do. Yeah, but always open to ideas on like different types of community initiatives that we can do. But if it's sort of schemes that involve pumping the coin, you've come to the wrong place, my friend.
Yeah, I think Terra has a long history of shipping and not making too much noise about it. The products speak for themselves. Right. Okay, so we've got a bit less than 15 minutes left before the end of the meeting. So maybe just like an open discussion from you, though. Do you want to talk about the hackathon that's going to be occurring in May, or any of the upcoming protocols that are scheduled to be released on the Terra ecosystem? Obviously, if you ask people, they will want to know what kind of airdrop they're going to get in the next few weeks. But I think you know better what to communicate about here.
So Seb, there just seems to be like a bunch of questions coming in from.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that.
Why don't I just get to a few of these? How's the food like in Busan? It's awesome. How do you expect we can get mass adoption globally like you have achieved in Korea? We're working on it. It's like 20 different things that are happening. So let's see how those go first. No, nothing regarding pumps, just a lackluster Reddit community as an example. I definitely do think the products for themselves. Just gonna move on. How's the weather in Busan this time of year? It's pretty awesome. How can someone become a resident entrepreneur at Terraform Labs? Well, why don't you come up with an idea that's like super cool and then email me about it, and then got yourself a job. Well, but then again, if it's a really good idea, why would we want that job? You just launch it, right? Is there any progress towards TFL's DAOification? Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're diversifying in lots of different ways, but yeah, there's definitely more that we can do here, and we're working on it. Regarding liquid circulating supply, is it fast depleting, or are we expecting a supply squeeze in the end of the year? Actually, like in terms of the actual liquid supply on exchanges, it's actually very, very low on terms of the float, which is why when prices increase, it just like goes up really fast. And when prices crash, it also crashes really fast as well. So that's like a necessary function of the supply squeeze. And another side effect that you might have experienced is exchanges like frequently halting deposits and withdrawals. It's because, like at any given time, exchanges might keep like a bunch of coins lent out to different parties, or they might be, staking different coins to be earning passive income as coins are resting. But because the circulating supply is diminishing quite quickly, you would be experiencing things like that. So we expect this to get worse as more USD gets minted across Terra's different protocols and Luna gets burned more and more. UK and European regulators are eyeing Binance for their stock tokens. I realize Binance is a centralized entity, but a precedent could affect on-ramp applications in the EU or UK, or adoption of M assets by centralized exchanges. Let's see. Well, I mean, for one thing, I think what Binance is doing and what we're doing is quite different. Binance is more of it's a custodial centralized entity. So essentially they're playing the role of a broker operator when they're choosing to sell tokenized equities. Whereas for us, we actually don't run Mirror protocol at all. Like we contribute engineering, but like in terms of direct financial upside, we have nothing. And we actually don't play any role in governance at all. Like we don't really have governance coins to be able to do this. And all the different proposals that have happened across Mirror have happened independently of us. Like we haven't voted on any proposals, and we have provably no stake to be able to do anything useful. So that's just the way things stand. And if Europe could blame us for doing something, it would be for writing code, which to the best of my understanding is protected in most democracies as an act of freedom of speech. But it's arguable as to whether most European nations represent democracies these days. Can you comment on how you came up with the 20% for USD staking if you get, let's say, 2 billion USD overnight from Sun Exchange listings of USD? Okay, I don't know what this is. So I'm just going to move on. Could Anchor tap into other sources of yield than POS rewards at this point, like LP yields, for example? Well, yeah, so I think this is like a useful discussion to have, and something that I touched upon in the secret call this morning. So technically, we could tap into lots of different sources of yield that are significantly higher than the POS yield. Similar to how, like in traditional finance, there's lots of different sources of yield that are higher than the federal funds rate. But Anchor is like not in that market, right? So Anchor is designed to be the reference interest rate across all the different blockchains, which means that it can only tap into yields that are the most reliable and the most likely to stand the test of time across all the different blockchains. And it just turns out that sources of yield, like let's say urine farms or LP rewards, have an expiration date, and they're likely to be much more volatile than the monetary policy that underpins the chains that all of these applications are sitting on top of. So I think we're going to stick to POS staking yields for now, but maintain an open mind for how this can evolve over time. Okay. Yeah, I think this was like a pretty good AMA. Filled most of the questions, but Sat, do you have any closing thoughts or closing questions that you want to ask before I sign off?
No, not really. I think everything that I wanted, key questions I wanted to ask or to relay to you have been asked. People are really looking forward to all the new protocols coming in, but I don't think we have much time to talk about all of them, and I'm losing track of all of them. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time, and then just thank everyone for supporting the effort and making Terra a very nice community to live in.
Yeah, so as a closing thought, the last thing that I wanted to say to the Terra community is, so we're at a really pivotal time where we're transitioning from, let's say, like a few applications that sort of hit it out of the park. So that's why a lot of people sort of mention Terra as an application-specific blockchain, especially even if there's a lot of different applications that have been built on top of it, because it was sort of powered by an imagination of just one person. But what's going to be happening to the Terra ecosystem over the next 6 months is that really the market share of all the ingenuity that's been generated on Terra, I'm going to be a tiny fraction of that effort. So just today, I spoke to 4 different entrepreneurs that are building interesting things on top of Terra that is not publicly announced, that I just mind blown and humbled by their passion and ingenuity and the ability to execute at such a fast speed that essentially, I think over the next 6 months, Terra is going to turn into like a very large ecosystem with many different types of financial applications, where Anchor and Mirror definitely set the tone, but are definitely not the only part of the defining narrative in the blockchain. So there's a lot of different things where you guys as the community can support a lot of these different efforts as they spring up. So young protocols, especially in the beginning, require lots of participation from community members in governance, in user feedback, and especially in terms of vigilance as well, to make sure that they can grow up to be transparent and well-functioning protocols to evolve well over time. So, like in your busy schedules during the bull market, don't just watch the prices of coins on CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap. Make sure that you're trying out everything that's popping up in the Terra ecosystem, and make sure that the entrepreneurs that are building these things can be held to account, and make sure that they're creating beautiful products that can take Terra to the next step in its infant stages. And thank you so much, everyone. We plan to be doing these AMAs around once a month, and look forward to talking with all of you on Telegram and Twitter.
Thanks a lot, though.
Okay.
Talk to you later. Have a good night.
Sounds good. Signing off. Bye-bye.